Like I said before, I thought he was trying to make everybody come buy our oil and just choke off China. But he had already been briefed on, hey, these boys could close the Strait of Hormuz. That's going to cause a shortage. That's going to cause the global markets to go crazy. So, we need to have a backup plan. That's why we kidnapped Maduro. That's why. So, he said the war's going to be over in, 3-4 days. Go bomb everything. He thought there was going to be regime change. That didn't happen either. So here we are almost 6 months in, and no one thought to bring up the SPR oil reserves before we started the war. We just said, hey, we're going to jack Maduro. We'll do that. Instead of picking up the SPR oil reserves and bringing it up to par. The oil reserve was already low when the war started. Y'all didn't know that, did y'all? Now, see, in the news, all you hear about is, oh, we did a drawdown in the SPR about 4 times. That's true. But they don't tell you about all the loans we done out of the SPR. They don't tell you about all the federal mandates we done out of the SPR. So when the gentleman was asked today, hey man, ain't the oil getting kind of low? War ain't nowhere in sight. And I noticed that, at a lot of the gas stations, we don't even have premium gas anymore. It's just regular gas. When the gentleman said this, I knew he was lying.
We're running low on inventory. U.S. oil inventories fall to, quote, precariously low level as Iran war disrupts supply.
The supply of oil, we also have to factor in the reserves that the U.S. has and that the rest of the world has been tapping into over the last several months as this conflict has been ongoing. Mr. Secretary, we know the SPR is at the lowest level in 4 decades, more than that. And I wonder how much lower realistically it can be allowed to go, where the operational floor is and what the plan is if we reach it.
Oh, we are a long way from the operational floor. I've heard some people that don't understand, not you, but I've heard people who don't understand how the SPR works saying, oh, it can't go below X amount of barrels. That's just not true. They seem to misunderstand that it's just oil in these caverns and otherwise it's air. All of these caverns are full of a combination of water and oil, and they are always 100% full. We just use the water to displace the oil out of these caverns. But with the planned sales we have, which will run into this fall, we'll still have meaningful supply, over 200 million barrels of oil in our SPR at the end of those releases. Oh, we are a long way from the operational floor.
Now that's real easy to say when you don't know what the operational floor is. So 311.4 million is what we have in reserve right now.
But with the planned sales we have, which will run into this fall, we'll still have meaningful supply, over 200 million barrels of oil in our SPR at the end of those releases.
And that was the most shocking thing that I heard, because let me tell you something. I worked at one of these SPR places down off the coast. So I know what they used to tell me about the reserve. And that was, it shouldn't fall below 300. Here's the foremost engineer on those caverns. But first, let me tell you about the caverns that the oil is in.
Instead of giant metal tanks, the US government stores its emergency crude oil inside 60 colossal artificial caves carved into underground salt domes. Some of these caverns are so massive you could easily fit a skyscraper inside. Salt is naturally waterproof and seals its own cracks under pressure. But how do they get the oil out? Simple. Because oil floats, engineers pump water into the bottom of the cavern. This forces the crude oil up to the surface and directly into pipelines. It costs 10 times less than building tanks above ground.
Now, the only part that I disagree with that was about pumping the water from the bottom to push the oil out, because it's not exactly water. It is brine. You know, the stuff you see on the side of the road during the winter snowstorm and the snow and ice and salt starts to melt? That's what's in the bottom. It's brine. So that has to be pumped in very, very slowly to keep the cavern from collapsing. The pressure inside the cavern must be maintained, or else it could collapse. Because we was always worried about, hurricanes coming, and, if the SPR levels were too low, and then the salt would crack, or some anomaly that happens on the land. The salt will crack and then the oil could leak through. So the salt naturally heals itself by, how salt just kind of forms together once you put the water in there and stuff. But if it cracks at the top of the cavern, then collapse happens.
I don't know anyone who believes we can go below 300. I know plenty of people who think we can't get near 300 because physically you will damage the caverns where the oil is stored.
So 300 million barrels is sort of the bottom. It's not zero. No one exactly knows how the physics, how the flow rate is going to react, like a straw sort of at the bottom of a glass when there's not a lot of liquid in it.
Well, I don't know. We definitely don't know that point, right? But we do know that before you get to the point that you can't take things out because they start collapsing on you, the caverns will get so much damage you won't be able to refill them.
These are actual caves. These are caves, like
Correct.
Actual caves in the ground.
Correct. And at some point, the physics are that when the level it gets to a level that is so low that before you can't take anything out anymore, you can't sustain the 8 million barrels a week.
Now, here's a fun fact. We are using 20 million barrels a week because of the war.
Because it starts slowing the flow. But the same thing is true for the commercial tanks. So when you hear people talk about tank bottoms in a few weeks from now, that's because those are also not filling at the moment. They're only drawing. They also can't go to zero, right? You can't take it to absolute zero. There's a certain layer. Now, we've never gone this low before. But in any event that we're referring to here, you're going to reach sometime in early July to mid-July, and with the commercial ones, maybe even at the end of June, a point where you cannot draw anymore. Now, the U.S. is exporting both crude and products to global markets, so we're helping to stabilize global markets in the moment. But you're going to get to a really big decision that has to be made here. If we're still in this situation in 2-3 weeks from now, people in Washington are going to start saying, wait a minute, what happens next week or in 10 days? Am I going to still allow folks to export while prices are going to start rising? Because the market right now has decided I'm not paying attention to anything coming out of Washington. They tell me the war is over, but that's 37 times we've had an announcement of the war is over, and we're still going. And there's no sign that the war is going to end. I mean, we literally just went to battle over the last 72 hours.
So let's do the math. See, I used to be a street pharmaceutical rep, which is frowned upon in the hood, so I had to be quick on my feet with the math. There is 20 million barrels a day being used. That gentleman just said there's going to be 200 million barrels left when we do this release. We need 70 million to maintain the pressure in the caverns. That leaves 130 million barrels. Using 20 million barrels a day, that only leaves 6.5 days of oil. I'm just saying.